Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Bob Beckel, Eric Bowling, Andrea Tanteros, and Greg Guffell. It's 8 o'clock in New York City, and this is a special edition of The Five. Tonight, new developments on the passenger plane shot down over Ukraine. President Obama says pro-Russian separatists are to blame. Did Vladimir Putin help them? That's what the world wants to know. Also tonight, Israeli troops are pushing deeper into Gaza in its ground offensive to cripple Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered them to prepare for a significantly wider campaign that could last up to 2 weeks. We have Team Fox coverage. John Huddy is in Gaza City. Ed Henry is at the White House. But first, we begin with Steve Harrigan in Kiev, Ukraine. Steve?
European crash expert officials from the OSCE are already on site in eastern Ukraine, but they say they're not being allowed to do their job by Russian-backed rebels. Here in the capital of Kiev, anger remains white-hot with fingers pointed straight at Russia. Officials saying this was an act of terrorism by the Russians. People on the street also pushing their government to respond with force to what they consider an outrageous action. It is difficult to form any analysis on the ground. That's because where the plane went down, about 25 miles from the Russian border, it's still an active fighting zone. You can hear the sound of Russian-built Grad rockets as well as gunfire in the area. And getting to that territory is no easy feat, with many of the roads with checkpoints or roads destroyed as well. All sides still pointing the finger at each other, but the real question is, what's going to happen next? Will this be a motive for a possible ceasefire now that the global implications of this fight in eastern Ukraine have become clear to everyone? Both President Obama and President Putin of Russia have called for an immediate ceasefire, but with tensions now running so high, that could prove to be a difficult challenge. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Steve. Let's go now to Fox's John Huddy in Gaza City, where Israel is stepping up its ground and air offensive. John?
Well, the past 24 hours has been some of the bloodiest and also most intense fighting so far in Operation Protective Edge, and some of that fighting has come very close to us. In fact, just about 10 minutes ago, there was a heavy missile strike just behind the location where we are. And we're kind of on guard at this point because there's been several in this area. There was also incoming artillery fire across the street on a location along the coast here. And all day that's been the case since all of this started last night when ground troops started moving in over the Israel-Gaza border. We've seen and heard a lot of explosions, a lot of fighting to the north. And now troops are pushing even further into Gaza City. And a lot of that action has been in and around our location, as I said. The number one objective here in Operation Protective Edge is to go in and root out the underground tunnels, the network of tunnels created by Hamas throughout a network of them zigzagging under Gaza, Gaza City, North Gaza, East Gaza as well. And that's where troops primarily are staged right now. More than 70,000 troops are amassed at this point along the border. So we're expecting things to intensify throughout the evening into the overnight hours and the early morning. Right now, according to my watch, it is just past 3 a.m. So this is when things really start kicking off, as we've seen the past 11 days. Back to you.
Thanks, John. Now to the White House, where Ed Henry has new reaction from President Obama today. Ed?
Kimberly, the president just got off the phone with a series of world leaders. He headed to Camp David for the weekend, but before leaving was on the phone with Prime Minister of Australia, UK, talking mostly about trying to build support for getting international investigators into Ukraine to basically investigate the crime scene. Right now, we're told separatists are still armed on the scene, preventing investigators from getting in there. There's great fear here at the White House that evidence is going to be taken to Russia, including the black boxes. There's going to be a cover-up. And that's something the president has been forceful on. What he's been less forceful on, and a very interesting contrast in tone today between he and Samantha Power, his ambassador to the United Nations. At a news conference here at the White House, President very cautious about what to do with Vladimir Putin, how to respond to Russia, if in fact they were involved directly or indirectly here in shooting down this jetliner. The president said we still don't have all the evidence, we don't want to get ahead of the facts, also saying that he's going to take the military option, a U.S. military option, off the table. Republican John McCain says this shows the president's leadership has been AWOL. Listen.
We don't see a U.S. military role beyond what we've already been doing in working with our NATO partners and some of the Baltic states, giving them reassurances that we are prepared to do whatever is required to meet our alliance obligations.
There is American perception of American weakness throughout the world, and we are paying a very heavy price for it, and we will continue to until we have a restoration of American strength.
Big focus on what's next here. The president taking that military option off the table. So the focus is on sanctions. The president today making the case that this should be a wake-up call for European allies to step up with tougher sanctions against Russia. But so far, European allies have rejected that. They're worried that it'll boomerang on their own economies if they go after Russia, number one. And number two, the U.S. sanctions so far have had some impact on the Russian economy, but they seem to have had little impact on Putin and his actions. Kimberly?
Ed Henry live from the White House. Thank you. All right, Eric, let's talk about next steps. Ed Henry mentioning some economic sanctions, what steps we need to take going forward. And of course, we also heard an update regarding the investigation. The rebels and separatists are still blocking access to that forensic-rich crime environment to determine exactly what happened and who's responsible.
And I think the most important thing that Ed pointed out is that the president is cautious. If you think back 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, when President Reagan was president, the Russians knocked down a Korean airliner.
Right.
269 people died in that. President Reagan came out very forcefully with the Russians, and they backed off. Ed's right. Sanctions. That's what we need to do. And I think Ed points out that the European Union is nervous about sanctions because, frankly, a lot of the European Union gets a lot of their oil and gas from Russia, and they're worried about any sort of maybe stoppage or prices going higher for them. So you want to put some pressure on Russia. I talked about in the earlier show that maybe we put some sanctions on Russia in the oil business. I got a better idea. I just, thinking about this. Let's do, I don't know, let's help out the European Union with oil prices. If oil prices go higher, we'll help them out. We'll ship them some oil. We'll help them out with some natural gas. We'll arrange for natural gas to go there. I will tell you, they would immediately fix that problem with Russia.
To provide an incentive for them to come stand side by side with the United States in pressing Russia with economic sanctions that will have meaning. You also heard John McCain speaking there, Greg, talking about sort of the absence of a leadership or meaningful input from the United States, that the world leaders, including and most especially Putin, are not standing back when it comes to facing President Obama on this.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in certain crises, Obama is more MIA than Casey Kasem. Crime scene is ruined. It's not, but we have to understand, it is our crime scene. There was an American killed there. I don't know why we were asking Russia for help in this, or they have. What they're doing is they're violating a law. This is a crime scene that involves no Russians, as far as I can tell. So this is about other countries finding about their loved ones and finding out what happened. The other thing is, saying that there are no military options is a really stupid thing to say, because there is a military option, and it doesn't mean war. It means troops. It means sending troops to certain countries nearby, which will tick off Putin. And also a military option is building up our military. We're drawing down right now. Maybe it's time to build back up, because the world is a dangerous place. It's an ugly place, and if we're not here to help fix the problem, then we are part of the problem. You can't maintain freedom unless you make some ugly, tough choices.
All right, Andrea.
Well, Putin just feels like he can do whatever he wants, because for years now we've been perceived as weak. I mean, the president has made promises to the Russians. Everyone remembers that open mic moment. He's drawn red lines that he has not enforced. And now we're basically saying, we trust you, along with other countries, to investigate this. They've already ransacked the crime scene. The black boxes are already gone. Then we hear that there may not be a black box on the ground. We also have this report coming from the Associated Press. One of the separatist leaders is trying to give this bizarre theory, and this one's really incredible, that the people on the plane were already dead. Did you hear that one? I mean, the bizarre is really starting to come out. It's pretty obvious who is behind this. It's also obvious that President Obama is sticking to the template. When things happen, he just calls for an investigation, whether it's an international crisis or whether it's one here at home, and it's going to be no different.
No, we got to go to a tea, so thank you for getting the other side.
I have a question.
No, that's all right. Go for it. It's fun.
Bob, I have a question for you because the critics are saying that the president gave a very measured, dispassionate speech when he could have had an opportunity there to hold Putin personally responsible. Was this a missed opportunity?
In fact, no, it was not a missed opportunity. Let me say three things very quickly. You talk about the Korean airline. Russians backed off. They already shot the thing out of the air, number one. Number two, the idea about a military, nobody in their right mind would consider military action in the Crimea. And he did say that he was willing to go with our allies in the Balkans to ensure them. So I think that's a fair thing to say. This is the worst thing that could happen to Putin. What it's going to do is going to galvanize the international community. And I think he's sitting back there saying, I blew it. And by the way, who's going to go get the black boxes? We're going to go in there. We're going to invade to get black boxes?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, you would? You invade Ukraine?
We already have people nearby. We should be going in there and getting that. That does not belong. That does not belong to Russia.
I listen to John McCain complaining about weakness. John McCain never comes up with it. He says it fast, but he never comes up with an answer. What are you going to do?
I gave him an answer.
Yeah, you did, but he didn't.
Unfortunately,
these guys shoot their mouths off and they don't come up with an answer.
Bob, unfortunately, time has been lost.
Yes, of course.
Because the black boxes and other items have been removed from the crime scene that would be very helpful in the investigation.
And that is Obama's fault?
And no, Putin, Russia is saying that they will handle the investigation and they'll let us know what happened. When we come back, are Vladimir Putin's fingerprints on the downing of the plane in Ukraine? You'll hear an intercepted phone call that may just implicate the Russian leader. This special edition of The Five returns in a moment.